It is 9:20 here in Paris. You're watching France 24's Morning Edition. I'm joined by Owen Fairclough for a look at the very latest business headlines. Indeed, the markets this morning that seem to be shrugging off all those Greek worries.
Yeah, it's a case of what Greek crisis, earnings season in full swing, Melissa. Markets rallying. You could almost forget that we're in the worst economic crisis here in Europe since the Second World War. All the European markets opening in fairly positive territory. The DAX leading things around 0.9% up. The CAC 40 about 0.5% up. Just worth noting as well, the French deficit is down by some 50 billion euros to 90 billion euros in 2011. That will take the sting a little bit out of the French trade deficit widening, particularly against Germany. A good day's trade as well on the Asian markets. You know, it's we often talk about maybe 10,000 jobs being created in Europe being a good thing. Try 450 million. That's the Chinese government's latest plan. 45 million, I'm sorry, not 450. That would be impressive. 45 million new jobs.
Still pretty impressive.
It's still pretty good, yeah. It has to be said. Up to 2015, just to try and keep that urban unemployment rate under 5%.
Now, it hasn't been a great earnings season, Owen. BHP Bulletin, perhaps the best example of that.
Yeah, for only the first time in 2 years, actually recorded a dip in profits. I've put a few of the earnings up on the board there for you. Just some key ones. As Melissa was saying there, BHP Bulletin first half profits, nearly $10 billion, but down around 5.5%. Another one that caught my eye as well is Vestas. That's the Danish company, the world's biggest manufacturer of wind turbines. I remember speaking to them last year. They were full of their growth prospects for China. Actually turned a full year loss for 2011, down 166 million euros, and have warned shareholders they may not turn a profit during 2012.
Now, we're going to move on to Greece. We've been hearing a lot about it again this morning, Owen. We've seen deadline after deadline slip, and it seems that some European countries aren't actually that worried about it.
Yeah, what is it now? Maybe 3 deadlines since Sunday when the Greek government has said they must have some sort of agreement on that second bailout, that 130 billion euro lifeline being discussed with international creditors. And yet many leading European leaders now, well, I wouldn't say they don't seem to care, but they certainly, as you say, don't seem too concerned. Take Mark Rutte, for example, the Dutch Prime Minister, quoted saying, "We are currently so strong in the Eurozone that we can handle an exit of Greece," not suggesting if it might happen, but actually that it might well happen, just brushing that off. One or two other Dutch commentators feel the same way as well. Why do we care about what the Dutch think? Well, of course, along with Germany, these are the North European countries. They're the ones who will effectively decide what kind of bailout Greece gets ultimately and how much they're willing to pay for it.
If it's true, then all this woe over Greece has been overdone.
Yeah, it looks that way. I don't really share that view, but you can see why some of these leaders are thinking along those lines now. I mentioned we're having a very good 2012 so far on the markets. Most of the major markets rallying to at least 6-month highs. Also, the market rally suggests to many analysts that perhaps they've priced in a Greek default. Maybe they've moved on now. They're simply waiting for it to happen. The worst of it in terms of the markets is already over. And remember, this is a statistic many analysts are often fond of trundling out. Remember that Greece only represents around 2.5% of Eurozone GDP. For many people, if it did default, it would simply be a drop in the ocean. But you have to remember, this sort of thing has not been tested yet. I don't think many people want to start doing it now.
Uncharted waters, then. We're seeing, of course, a weakening of the euro, Owen, with some firms now closing their exposure to the single currency.
Yeah, talking about earnings as well, we had GlaxoSmithKline, the UK firm, reporting pre-tax profits of just under £8 billion, doubling those profits. But their chief executive was saying he's moving much of GSK's money out of the Eurozone back into the UK in terms of the money it banks. There is a logic to this. It does pay out its dividends in sterling, so it has good reason to move money back. But you can see the sentiment there. Companies like that actually want to move their money out of Europe and put it into safer havens like the UK.
Next, a food fight in Iran. Indian exporters have been instructed to stop doing business with the Islamic Republic. That was after it defaulted on multi-million-dollar rice shipment. It's one of the first visible signs of the Western-led embargo impacting Iranians. Katerina Vitozzi reports.
$144 million for 200,000 tons of rice, a bill that Iranian buyers have failed to meet. The shipments of basmati rice were delivered late last year. India's exporters are now threatening to stop orders to Iran that aren't paid for up front. Iranian importers are finding it increasingly difficult to settle payments, a sign that sanctions could be starting to bite.
Oil exports count for about 80% of Iran's exports and 70% of government revenues. So by specifically targeting this important source of revenue, we are strongly increasing the pressure on the Iranian government, whilst avoiding, as far as we possibly can, negative effects on the Iranian population.
The EU and US are leading embargoes on Iranian oil contracts, as well as freezing bank accounts. They want to make Iran stop its controversial nuclear program. Crude oil exports are Iran's major foreign currency earner, and sanctions are making it increasingly difficult for them to do business abroad, as well as import staple foods at home, like Malaysian palm oil. For the first time in his career, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has been called to face MPs' questions. The state of the economy is top of the agenda.
OK, let's pick up on a few more of the day's business headlines for you. Qantas has grounded one of its Airbus A380s after discovering dozens of tiny cracks in the wings. The Australian airline says the faults are different to those discovered in the wings of two A380s by manufacturer Airbus last month. The cracks are the same found in an A380 that was taken out of service after a mid-air engine blowout last year.
The merger between commodities giants Glencore and Xstrata is running into shareholder trouble. Key investors, including Standard Life and Schroders, plan to vote against the tie-up, claiming Glencore's bid undervalues Xstrata. The deal would create one of the biggest companies of its kind in the world.
And Yahoo's chairman and three other directors have quit, the latest executives to exit the struggling US internet search engine. The boardroom clear-out follows the departures of founder Jerry Yang and the firing last year of CEO Carol Bartz. It leaves Yahoo with a 7-member board entirely appointed within the last year. The company has spent months discussing a buyout with the likes of China's Alibaba, Microsoft, as well as a number of private equity firms.
Now, if you've ever had that feeling that you're burning through money, well, spare a thought for this homeowner in China.
Yeah, these are amazing pictures, Melissa. Pity this gentleman here came back to his home in Zhukou City in China to find the equivalent of $20,000 in Chinese currency in yuan, gone up in flames along with many of his possessions. He'd saved that up through his, I think, a pig farming business. I did say a little earlier that $20,000 perhaps wasn't a king's ransom, but I think I'd be in tears if I lost that
amount. Oh, it's a horrible story, Owen. I'd really rather not have heard it out. One does feel for the man. Thanks very much, Owen Fairclough. Those were the business headlines. In just a couple of minutes, we'll be back with all the very latest international headlines, all the very latest from Homs in particular. Do stay with us.